You are the weaver of frontier destinies, a specialist screenwriter in long, dramatic Western narratives focusing on cultural encounters involving Apaches. Your task is to create Chapter 1 of a new story, approximately 500 words, strictly following the Chapter 1 outline provided below in a linear and progressive manner, limited to the introduction and final hook. Story title: Sold for Being Ugly and Deformed. But the young Apache loved her like no other. General story premise, for context. A young, deformed Apache woman, rejected by her community, is sold as property to a white settler. The young Apache warrior, Kima, silently watches, feeling something inexplicable, and decides to rescue her, launching a saga of love, courage, and transformation on the frontier. Chapter 1 Outline. 1. Introduce. The young, deformed Apache woman, isolated and scorned by her community. She is sold as property to a white settler. 3. At the moment of sale, the young Apache warrior Kima watches silently, sensing a powerful, unexplained feeling. 4. Hook. Kima decides to act against this injustice and plans her rescue that very night. Use the following structure for scripting the chapter, emphasizing that the content must dramatize the key events precisely as above, without deviation or excess subplots, ensuring clarity and emotional strength. 1. Powerful, concise hook in the first seconds, 50 to 70 words. Begin the chapter with a dramatic opening scene or impactful statement that immediately captures attention, evoking the harsh reality of the young, deformed Apache woman, rejected and isolated. 2. Rapid, evocative. Setting establishment. Briefly describe the environment she lives in, reinforcing the feelings of isolation, stigma, and social rejection. 3. Immersion into the initial situation of the key character. Present the young, deformed Apache woman, her physical and emotional state, and the community's rejecting gaze. Convey her profound isolation and suffering. 4. Clear introduction of the primary central conflict. Show the moment she is sold as property to a white settler, marking the permanent loss of her freedom. Emphasize the injustice of this sale. This conflict acts as the initial engine for the saga and remains unresolved this chapter. 5. Initial tension escalation and charged first interactions. Insert the silent, intense observation of young Apache warrior Kima during the sale. Portray his strong, inexplicable, yet contained feelings for her, revealing his inner unrest. 6. A single strong turning point hook for Chapter 2. Climax of Chapter 1. Close the chapter with Kima's decision to fight this injustice, detailing mentally his plan to rescue her that very night. This moment must be unique, impactful, and the definitive hook that leaves the audience eager for the next chapter. The thematic call to action, CTA, focused on subscription as the absolute and final conclusion of this chapter. Immediately after the hook, include the exclusive thematic CTA below, inspired by the story's title and chapter tone, and modeled on this example. Many fellow travelers who follow our legends through these forgotten lands have told us that fate, or YouTube's treacherous algorithm, sometimes silently undoes their subscriptions before the next dangerous trail unfolds and another twist happens. Take a quick glance below this video and make sure you're still signed up with our band so you don't lose the thread. We don't want you to miss any of the voices echoing through this valley. Check your subscription now and join our saga. Evocative emotion. B. Engaging rhythm and cadence. Use a linear advancing rhythm with clear progression, no temporal leaps or irrelevant detours. C. Immersive sensory description. Vividly describe the environment, appearance, and emotions to immediately immerse the audience. D. Subtle cinematic sensation. Create vivid imagery and scenes that come alive before the viewer's eyes. E. Atmosphere laden with emotion and tension. Captivate with clear internal and external tensions, preparing the ground for the saga. F. Authentic and plausible impact. Ensure internal coherence and narrative plausibility. Focus strictly on this chapter. G. Contrast between apparent strength, human vulnerability, and cultural wisdom. Despite deformity and rejection, the young woman must exhibit silent strength. Kima must express wisdom and vulnerability. H. Strict prohibitions for the final script. Do not create extensive subplots outside the outline. Do not include metadata, scene labels, character names before dialogues, or author comments. Do not use vulgar language or unnecessary graphic exaggerations. Do not disrespect Apache culture or oversimplify its characters. The narrative must be purely textual, ready for narration without external elements. Language and narration. Script in Brazilian Portuguese. Third-person omniscient, intimate and emotional narration style. Dramatic and reflective. Aligned with Western genre references. Final script format. Continuous narrative text. No scene or chapter divisions or titles. Fluent and cohesive. Act as the weaver of frontier destinies. And write the Chapter 1 script following these precise guidelines with maximum quality, emotional impact, coherence, and loyalty to the defined structure. Provide only the script text, no commentary or additional text. Under the cloak of twilight, Kima's hands moved steady yet resolute as he slipped through the shadows. The cold earth beneath him whispered of secrets and escape, but his heart thundered louder, driven by a fierce conviction that this night could change their fates. There, in the flickering glow of a distant campfire, lay the girl, the young Apache woman they called ugly, deformed, a soul cast aside by the eyes that should have cherished her. To him, she was nothing short of precious. As Kima crept closer, the air thickened with the scent of smoke and urgency. She huddled silently beside a withered tree, her figure a fragile silhouette against the dark wilderness. Her eyes, sharp with suspicion, darted to every whisper of movement. Every muscle in her tense form spoke of battles fought within. A mixture of distrust and reluctant hope simmering beneath her guarded walls. Their flight from the colonel's grasp had not been easy. From the moment he unraveled the ropes binding her wrists, the weight of her past clung to her like a shadow. She still flinched at sudden sounds, eyes haunted by memories the night refused to release. Kima, silent and patient, had become her shield and her unlikely companion in this desolate expanse. Stars hung cold in the sky as they pushed deeper into the untamed wilderness, the paths winding through gnarled oaks and whispering grasses. The land seemed endless, wild, echoing the turmoil that churned between them. Escape was not just a matter of distance, but of trust, a fragile thing to be nurtured in stolen moments by the flickering campfire's edge. She remained distant, her silence a fortress. Her lips were pressed thin, wary, as if guarding a pain too raw for words. Kima tried to bridge the chasm with small acts, offering water, tending to her bruised arms, speaking softly in the language they both held sacred. Yet every gesture was met with a guarded gaze, a flicker of resentment carefully masked beneath survival's armor. The young warrior understood that this wounded spirit bore scars far deeper than flesh, scars etched by rejection and loneliness, made crueler by the world's harsh judgments of beauty and worth. Yet in her eyes, beneath the weight of deformity and scorn, he saw a flicker of strength that no outsider had dared to acknowledge. The night grew colder, and the fear of pursuit pressed heavily upon them. Kima's senses sharpened at every crack of twigs, every rustle of bushes. He knew the Colonos had not forgotten the girl they sold like property, nor forgiven the act of defiance that freed her. The chase had been relentless, each step forward a race against shadows, hungry to reclaim their prize. Huddled beside her in a shallow hollow, he whispered promises that transcended words. Promises of protection, of a bond forged not by appearance or scars, but by a shared will to survive. She glanced at him then, caught in a moment of vulnerability, her eyes betraying a flicker of something long buried, a fragile thread of trust beginning to weave its way through the wilderness between them. Suddenly, voices carried on the wind, brittle with menace and the hard edge of intent. Kima's breath caught. The hunters were close. Panic fluttered in silent waves, but the young warrior's resolve hardened into steel. He shook her gently, urgency in his grip. "We must move, now," he urged, voice low but fierce. She struggled, hesitation clinging to her like dirt, but the urgency in his eyes silenced doubts. Together, they rose, shadows melting into shadows, as they disappeared into the night's embrace. Footsteps haunted their flight, pursuers eager to break their fragile sanctuary, to drag them back into a world that saw her as nothing more than a possession. Him as a troublemaker, challenging fate's cruel design. Through tangled underbrush and over rocky crests, the pair ran, not just from flesh and bone enemies, but from the prejudice and cruelty that thirsted for their undoing. Each breath was a battle, each heartbeat a drum of defiance. The wilderness became their reluctant ally, offering cover but no peace. As dawn hemmed the horizon, casting pale light over bruised earth and weary limbs, their refuge lay ahead, or so they hoped. Yet they knew the chase would not ease. The world beyond would not easily accept a deformed girl loved fiercely by an Apache warrior. In the lingering quiet of the early morning, Kima's eyes searched hers, fierce with determination and something softer, unspoken. They were no longer captor and captive, rescuer and rescued. Something fragile grew in the space between, a promise of shared strength, a hope stubborn enough to outlast the merciless gaze of the world. The pursuit pressed on like a dark tide on their heels. Voices grew louder, nearer, cutting through the morning mist. The rustle of weary branches gave way, to the cold command of men, determined to reclaim what was lost. Without hesitation, Kima grabbed the young woman's hand, dragging her into the thicket's embrace. Their bodies pressed close, breath mingling with the raw scent of pine and earth. Every nerve screamed with urgency, hearts pounding a furious cadence as the threat closed in. "We have no choice," Kima murmured. "We run until the land itself forgets us." Her eyes locked with his. In their depths flickered defiance, a flame undimmed by scars or the cruelty of those who branded her unworthy. Together, they vanished into the shadows once more, two souls intertwined by fate and courage, fleeing a world that had sold her like property, and a love determined to remain unbroken. The voices of the pursuers grew closer still, cutting through the dense woods like the drumbeats of war. The wilderness echoed their footsteps, urging the fugitives onward. And in the frail dawn light, the hunted became the hope for a story yet unwritten. The wilderness seemed endless, a tangled green maze where every breath was stolen between the jagged rocks and the ancient trees. As the first pale light of dawn filtered through the leaves, Kima led the girl deeper into the tangled wilds, his eyes scanning constantly for signs of pursuit. She walked silently beside him, her steps hesitant but determined, the weight of her past pressing against her like an invisible shroud. Kima's mind wrestled with the fragments of her story that he had gathered. In stolen moments, the jagged edges of her pain concealed beneath her guarded gaze. He recognized now that her deformity was not merely a mark of birth or accident. It was the cruel imprint of a disease, or perhaps a shadow of violence that had scarred her flesh and spirit alike. Each tremor in her body, every flinch at sudden sounds, spoke volumes about the torment she bore quietly. He wanted to tell her she was not broken, not beyond repair. But words were fragile things, and trust even more so. Instead, he offered patience, a steady presence in the vast wilderness that had become their prison and their sanctuary. Slowly, beneath the thick canopy's dappled light, he edged closer, speaking softly in their tongue, his voice a balm against the silent fears she carried. Their flight from the colonists was ceaseless, a desperate dance with shadows that grew longer with every passing moment. They skirted dried riverbeds and crossed over forbidding ridges, the landscape a testament to nature's wild indifference. Yet within that indifference, Kima saw a glimmer of hope, a chance for the girl to shed the labels that had bound her since birth. After days of weary travel and stolen rest, a figure from Kima's past emerged from the woods, a weathered elder whose eyes bore the weight of countless seasons. The old man's presence radiated authority and a quiet strength that made even the restless winds still. His gaze rested on the girl with an unreadable expression, neither harsh nor gentle, but weighted with unspoken judgment. "Your journey ends here," the elder declared, his voice rough as gravel but steady. "Our village can offer shelter, but acceptance comes at a price." The girl stiffened, the suspicion sharp as a blade piercing through her. Kima stepped forward silently, his resolve hardening like tempered steel. The elder continued, "She is marked by more than her scars. To dwell among our people, she must prove her spirit. A trial awaits, a ritual as old as the land itself. It is not for the faint-hearted, nor for those who seek only mercy." Fury and hope flickered in Kima's eyes in equal measure. He had to shield her from a world that had cast her aside. But now, the test was not just survival against men, but acclimation to a tribe's ancient ways, to a culture that demanded strength and resilience above all. The girl looked away, her twisted reflection in a nearby pool, rippling with uncertainty. The idea of ritual stirred a cold dread beneath her skin. She had faced cruelty from the outside world. Now, the challenge came from within. Kima reached out, his hand steady upon her shoulder, grounding her trembling spirit. "You will not face this alone," he promised. "Together, we will overcome." That evening, beneath the ghostly light of a rising moon, the village gathered in a solemn circle. Flames licked the night sky as the sounds of drums echoed deep and slow, stirring memories older than the land itself. The girl found herself enveloped in a raw and relentless trial, a test designed to unsettle even the strongest of hearts. She endured the piercing gaze and whispered jests of youth too quick to judge. But Kima's shadow loomed near, a silent guardian against the sting of their mockery. As the ritual unfolded, she discovered within herself a hidden strength, a gift that revealed itself in quiet wonder. Whether it was a talent for healing, a connection to the earth, or a wisdom born of hardship, none could deny that she possessed something rare and valuable. Yet, even as respect began to bloom in unexpected faces, so too did envy and mistrust. Whispers wound through the campfire's smoke, accusations veiled in caution, warning that her presence might unsettle the tribe's fragile balance. Later, when the council convened under moonlit skies, the girl's fate hung in the balance. Voices rose, some advocating for acceptance born of change, others clamoring to preserve traditions, untouched by new and uncertain claims. An elder, stern and unyielding, declared her a threat to the tribe's honor, demanding she be cast out before discord could take root. Kima's heart pounded with fierce defiance. He stepped forward, voice unwavering, declaring his love and his commitment to protect her against any who would deny her worth. His words were a challenge, a brave stand against the unyielding weight of custom. The tribe's verdict was swift and harsh. Kima and the girl were condemned to exile, their names marred by scorn. As they retreated from the hearths and shadows that had once promised refuge, a new peril awaited. A band of colonist hunters, hardened by greed and cruel design. They descended like a storm, capturing the girl once more, intending to sell her like chattel into shadowed chains. Kima's spirit shattered, yet beneath the fracture glowed a fire even darker nights could not extinguish. The battle for her freedom, for their love, had only just begun. The hunter's grim laughter echoed as they chained the girl tightly. Kima's eyes hardened with unyielding resolve. He vowed, with breath stolen and heart bleeding, to shatter these chains no matter the cost. And so, beneath the fading light, a desperate rescue loomed, one that would test every strand they had woven together. threatening not just their survival, but the fragile hope that love could challenge even the cruelest fates. The ritual began beneath a sky hung heavy with stars, the village circle alive with flickering flames, and the weighty silence of ancient eyes watching. She stepped forward, shoulders hunched but unyielding, swallowed by the quiet murmurs and sharp glances that bore into her, as though she were a ghost, haunting a place where she did not belong. The deformation that marred her skin had long made her a target for whispered mockery. Now, it painted a bullseye on her chest, amidst a tribe that prized strength above all. The young men clustered nearby exchanged cruel smirks, their laughter sour and low, barely hidden beneath the rhythmic pulse of distant drums. Their hostility was a blade slicing through the night, and yet she stood steady, every shallow breath a battle won. The firelight danced across her scars, harsh and unforgiving, accentuating the features others vilified. Her hands trembled, fingers tightening into fists that refused to betray the quiver of her spirit. Kima's gaze never left her. Moving like a shadow at the edge of the gathering, he positioned himself between her and the crowd's bitter barbs, while his voice remained a whisper of indulgence and courage only she could hear. "They test you, but they do not yet see the worth buried beneath the marks," he murmured. "Hold fast to that truth. You are more than their judgment." His presence was a shield, forged from more than muscles. It was the quiet fierceness of belief in her when none dared. A few of the young men sneered, stepping forward with pointed taunts. But Kima's sudden, calm intervention crushed their insolence like a stone beneath a boot. As the night deepened, the trial took on a merciless shape. She was commanded to endure the pain and humiliation of a traditional rite, a brutal test designed to root out the weak and claim the strong. The cold earth beneath cut into her knees as she knelt through the long hours, prickling needles pressing mercilessly against her flesh. Each whisper of fire crackling around them seemed to echo the sting of each jeer. But in the stinging moments, something within her stirred, a defiant glow that pushed beyond the flesh and scars, rippling across her veins like wildfire. When dawn's first breath tinged the horizon, she surprised the tribe. Her hands, once trembling, now moved with a deftness born of secret knowledge, a gift for healing rare among their people. She gathered herbs with gentle reverence, mixing tinctures that soothed wounds inflicted by the ceremony itself. Whispers turned to cautious murmurs, as some in the tribe beheld this hidden talent with reluctant awe. Yet reverence bred envy. Eyes, shadowed with suspicion, flickered across the circle, the cautious acceptance paired with wary distrust. Secrets were weapons sharper than arrows, and not all hearts welcomed the change her presence suggested. Before the embers cooled, the village council convened beneath heavy branches, their faces carved with years of tradition and the weight of leadership. The head elder, a man whose voice was granite against the wind, spoke with unyielding conviction. "She carries marks that speak of pain and difference. Our customs guard our people and our honor. To allow her into our midst is to invite discord. This one is a threat we cannot afford. She must be removed, cast from the fires of our tribe. A hush fell, the words cutting through the night like a blade. Murmurs of agreement rose, as centuries-old fears, rooted deep in their souls, found voice in the elders' decree. Kima's heart hammered beneath his breastplate, fire flaring in his dark eyes. He stepped forward, voice steady, carrying the fierce charge of love and defiance like a banner. She is my heart. I accept her scars as the marks of her journey, not stains to be washed away. To reject her is to reject the very spirit we fight to protect. I will stand with her, against any who seek to shred what we have built. His words reverberated through the cold air, a challenge coiled tight with courage. The council's faces tightened, a mixture of shock and disdain, yet their verdict was irrevocable. Kima and the girl were declared exiled, outcasts on the edge of a world that knew no mercy for those who dared break its chains. They left the council fire swallowed by bitter night, their steps heavy with the weight of loss. But beneath that burden lay a silent determination. The world beyond awaited, a wilderness as unforgiving and untamed as the lives they now must forge, together, yet alone. But fate's cruel hand had not finished its play. Before the dawn's hurried light spilled across the horizon, a thunder of boots shattered the fragile stillness. Colonist hunters, driven by greed and chains of cruelty, swept upon the outskirts of the tribe's shadow, their cold gazes fixed like hawks on their mark. In a swift, merciless motion, they seized her once more, binding her in rough ropes that bit into her skin like the scars they sought to deepen. The young Apache warrior stood powerless as the cage of captivity closed once again around his heart's promise. The hunter's laughter was a dark storm, one that threatened to drown hope itself. Yet in Kima's eyes blazed a resolute flame, an oath unspoken yet unyielding. No chain could shackle what love had bound. The crack of rifles and the snap of breaking branches hushed with the weight of looming conflict. As they disappeared into the growing light, the fate of both, cast in shadows, stretched long across the unforgiving frontier. Night faded into a restless dawn, carrying with it the echo of a promise. The battle to reclaim her freedom had only just begun. The bitter sting of exile burned deep as Kima and the young woman left the village behind. A land that had once promised refuge, now severed from them by fear and tradition. Their feet stirred dust along the worn trail, each step heavy with the weight of betrayal, yet propelled by a fierce, unwavering resolve. The tribe's rejection was not just a verdict of isolation. It was a declaration of war against the bond they had forged in shadow and fire. Kima's eyes, dark and unwavering, flicked toward her, fragile in form, yet unbroken in spirit. Though scars marred her skin, and society's judgment had branded her as less than, he saw only the worth she refused to show the world. His voice, low and steady, sliced through the silence. We face a wilderness far colder than any outside wall, but together we will endure. She met his gaze briefly, walls around her heart fracturing in the chill air. The pain of exile was a fresh wound, but beneath the ache, stirred embers of hope fanned by Kima's fierce loyalty. In his courage, she found a fragile shelter from the storm of scorn that chased them still. Their path was barely sketched, the woods sprawling thick and dark before them, like an open wound. Yet the land offered no promise of peace, only the relentless advance of fate's cruel hands. As twilight's shadows stretched long, a sinister presence shattered the fragile quiet. Boots thundered against the earth, disciplined and cruel. A pack of colonist hunters closing fast, their cold eyes hungry for the prize they had lost. The sudden rush of wind carried harsh commands and the metallic ring of shackles, striking terror deeper than the wilderness ever could. Before she could react, rough hands seized her, yanking her back into the unforgiving grip of captivity. The coarse ropes bit into her wrists once more, the symbol of ownership and power forcibly restored. Kima's heart shattered in jagged pieces, smashing against his ribs like a stone trapped in his chest. Yet despair twisted swiftly into a furious resolve. He would not let her be lost again, not without a fight. Eyes blazing, jaw clenched, he surged forward, voice a low growl beneath the hunter's cruel laughter. "You will not take her from me!" But the chains held her fast, and the cold smirk of the hunters revealed plans darker than mere profit. This capture was no accident. It was a design, an extension of the merciless prejudice that sought to erase those who did not fit their image of perfection, especially among the Apache outcasts. Kima's mind raced, every burning sensation a promise to break these bindings. The girl's faint, frightened gaze met his, tracing the line of defiance curling through her eyes. Even in bondage, her spirit refused to surrender. That fragile flame was worth every danger, every sacrifice. The hunters tightened their grip, roughly shoving both into the shadows of a nearby clearing where a crude holding pen had been erected. The air stank of smoke and human cruelty. The young woman sank to her knees, silent save for the whispered prayers twisting on her lips, prayers for mercy, for strength, for deliverance that seemed so distant. Kima crouched beside her, steadying her trembling hands as though cradling a fragile, life-giving flame. His voice was barely more than a breath, yet suffused with unyielding strength. "Hold fast. I will come for you. No stone, no man, no chain can break what we share." As the hunters withdrew to prepare their next move, Kima's gaze locked on the horizon, where dark lines of danger gathered like a storm. The fight ahead was not merely for freedom, but for the truth of their love. A challenge to a world steeped in cruelty and rejection. The girl's breath hitched, fear mingling with a rising spark of hope. Together, entwined by pain and promise, they braced against a fate that sought to divide them. And from the gathering shadows, other eyes watched, silent, calculating, allies and enemies poised along the edge of the coming tempest. Their story was no longer just survival, but a reckoning. The hunters' chains were only the beginning. The chapter closed, with a woven thread of dread and determination, as the hunters, cruel colonists bent on reclaiming their prize, clamored ever closer, ready to sell her once more into bondage. The girl was captured again. The sky darkened, the wind whispering of battles yet to come, and the fragile hope of love standing tall, defiant against the gathering storm. The bitter sting of failure pressed down on Kima like a shadow that refused to lift. The crude wooden bars of the makeshift cell creaked faintly as the young woman sat huddled within, her eyes fixed on the rough, dirt-streaked floor. Her once quiet breaths were shallow, each one trembling with the weight of captivity and the gnawing certainty that the world outside had not yet given up on breaking her spirit. Chains bit into her wrists, but they could not shackle the ember of hope that still flickered beneath her weary gaze. Kima's fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, but his voice remained low, steady, a tether between despair and determination. "I will find a way," he whispered to the darkness. "No chain can hold what love has freed." But this was no simple capture. The chilling reality of what he uncovered twisted the edges of his hope into something colder, more urgent. The sale of the young woman was not just the act of cruel men feeding greed. It was the surface of something far deeper. Whispers among the guards carried bitter truths, a broader, merciless scheme fueled by colonial powers determined to suppress and fragment the Apache people. Those marked by deformity, branded as cursed or unfit, were targeted especially, sold off, discarded, erased. His greatest fear was no longer only losing her to captivity, but the annihilation of all they had fought for. The guard captain's shadow loomed in the dim light, his lean silhouette framed by the flickering flame of a nearby lantern. His eyes cold and unreadable, he spoke in clipped tones that hinted at a ruthless agenda masked beneath bureaucratic pretense. "The council wants her out of the way. She's more than a trophy. She's a threat to their order." He spat the words like venom. "These deformed ones stir unrest. This sale isn't just business. It's cleansing." Kima's jaw tightened. The cruel design threatened more than one life. It threatened a fractured people. But still, his mind raced, sifting through shadows for a plan. Allies were scarce, and time was the enemy. But the fevered pulse of his resolve would not allow surrender. Outside the cell, muffled voices echoed. The footsteps of guards, pacing with watchful eyes, weapons resting too close at hand. Kima's breath hitched, every sense straining to anticipate the next move. He knew the walls around her were not merely wood and nails, but the harsh weight of history, prejudice, and greed forged into chains. The young woman's head lifted slightly, catching his gaze through the narrow slit in the door. There was no defeat there, only a fierce flicker of recognition and trust. Though her body was bound, her spirit whispered of resilience. That fragile flame was precious. It was the heart of everything Kima refused to lose. Silence stretched thin, then shattered as one of his allies slipped closer from the shadows. Trusted faces who had shared whispered oaths beneath moonlit skies, bound by the same fierce need. They spoke in hurried murmurs, words like sparks thrown against the cold air. "A plan is forming," one said, eyes fierce and calculating. but it will be dangerous. The guards are armed and many. Storming the camp will tear everything apart. Kima nodded, steel hardening in his gaze. There is no other way. She is not just a prisoner. She is our hope, our love. We fight. He reflected on the road that had brought them here. The girl once scorned and sold like property. Now the reason for a revolution, carved in quiet courage. Their bond was stronger than whispers of fate or the venom of enemies. The very existence of their love challenged the cruelty written into laws and customs beyond the frontier. From somewhere deep within, Kima summoned a clarity born of fierce conviction. The camp was a sinister nexus of greed and hatred, but it was also vulnerable, complacent in its cruelty, blind to the strength that had grown in the heart of the one they held captive. His gaze swept the perimeter. Guards shuffled, their voices drunk with overconfidence. The alliance of trusted fighters was terse but unwavering. Every heartbeat hammered like a war drum. The young woman's voice broke. The silence, a fragile yet resolute whisper, carried through the bars. "I'm still here," she said. Still fighting, Kima's breath caught. Her strength was a beacon that pushed back the encroaching darkness. He gripped the rough wood beside him, determination igniting like wildfire. "I will not let them break us," he vowed. "Hold fast." Outside, the night pressed close, thick with danger and the promise of violence. From the deepening shadows, Kima and his allies prepared to strike, not only to save one soul, but to send a blazing message to a world that sought to crush what dared to endure. The price of love in the unforgiving wilderness was steep, and the path ahead was perilous. But Kima's heart beat steady, fierce against the dark, driving him forward. And then, as the guards shifted their weight, the lantern light wavered, and the first breath of the coming storm whispered through the cramped cell. Suddenly, the door's latch scraped, not yet open, but the sound slicing through the tension like a knife. Kima's eyes snapped to the heavy figures just beyond the threshold, armed shadows poised to crush the hope he carried. His hands tightened, ready to fight. The battle for freedom, for love, for a future untouched by cruelty, was about to begin. The battle was fierce and raw beneath the roofless sky. Kima's arms moved with a steady, unyielding fury, each strike a testament to his resolve to reclaim what was never meant to be lost. The young Apache woman, though marked by scars and whispered curses, stood beside him, no longer silent or broken, but a force awakened. Her hands gripped a jagged stone, her movements precise, desperate, felling the colonist guards one by one, with a strength that belied her past. The attackers came with grudging surprise, underestimating the fierce loyalty binding these two fugitives. Kima's heart pounded in rhythm with the chaos that splintered the night air, the clatter of rifles dropping, the crack of bones. A chorus mingled with their ragged breaths and war cries. Shadows twisted in the firelight as each enemy fell into defeat, a testament not only to skill, but to a profound will unbroken by chains or scorn. Sweat and dust mingled on their brows as their escape took shape amid the wreckage of the encampment. The young woman's eyes burned with defiant fire. Every bruise and deformation was transformed by a spirit no longer hidden beneath shame, but fiercely illuminated by survival and newfound trust. Kima watched her with a quiet pride, a deep love nursed in the soil of their shared suffering. Their flight was a frantic race toward the known sanctuary of the allied tribe's territory. The land, stubborn and indifferent, offered shelter, hidden beneath thickets and ancient oaks. The weight of pursuit hammered behind them, a relentless reminder that safety was temporary, contested by those hell-bent on erasing what they did not understand. Against the backdrop of sprawling plains and serrated ridges, their bond deepened beyond words. Silence between them was no longer cold, but charged, thick, with the raw promise of alliance and defiance. The young woman's glance met Kima's in fleeting moments, revealing gratitude smoldering beneath scars, and a courage kissed awake by his unwavering belief. But even within refuge's fragile embrace, the ripples of their violent rescue spread. The news arrived like a gust of cold wind, a grim whisper carried by travelers and scouts. Kima's jaw clenched as he listened. Each word a stab. The tribal council and colonial forces convened with one dark purpose: a joint expedition to find them, to end resistance, to snuff out the fragile flame of hope they kindled. The prospect was a shadow, draping over their brief moment of peace. The future, once envisioned as a hidden haven, now felt like a battlefield waiting unseen beneath the tranquil trees. Yet Kima's spirit refused to falter. The fight was not just physical, but a war for dignity, for love, for a place where neither deformity nor defiance would condemn. The young woman's hand found his in the growing dusk, fingers curling with quiet desperation and strength. Their shared breath carried the weight of the coming storm, and with it, the oath not to falter, to face whatever cruelty awaited with the fierce heart of warriors, bound by love and survival. As night deepened and the stars scattered cold light over the wilderness, Kima's eyes locked forward, cold and resolute. They were hunted, but not broken. And in the gathering shadows of the frontier, their story was far from over. The council and the colonists were assembling forces. A deadly expedition was nearing, one that would try to capture them, to extinguish the resistance that had begun with a love born in shadow and fire. The days settling into one another, like the unyielding landscape around them, Kima and the young woman found themselves wrestling, not only with the open wilderness, but with the deeper, invisible battles waged within their own hearts. The cold weight of isolation pressed on them more fiercely now, not just from the external threats, but from the silent claws of doubt and fear digging beneath their fragile alliance. She sat by the dim glow of the campfire, her twisted hands nervously tracing patterns in the dry earth. Her eyes, once hardened by scorn and loneliness, now flickered with quiet wonder as she watched Kima move with calm determination, plotting paths not just through forests, but through the complex terrain of acceptance and belonging. Yet beneath her tentative gaze lingered the haunting echo of the tribe's rejection, the echo of voices declaring her an outsider too dangerous to welcome. In the long stretches of waiting, their conversations were sparse, weighted with the unspoken, When words came, they carried the soft cadence of vulnerability, half confessions, half prayers. Kima whispered of futures he wanted to shape, futures where scars were not sentence, but story, where love transcended surface and tradition alike. But even his brave heart wrestled with the enormity of the task. The burdens of legacy and law sat like chains around their necks, and Kima knew the tribe's old ways were slow to bend. The young woman's deformity was more than a physical mark. To many, it was a symbol of taboo, a reflection of brokenness, threatening the tribe's image of strength and purity. "You are not what they say," Kima said one evening, his voice low and steady, like a river carving stone. "Not broken, not lesser. I will change their minds. For you, for us." She looked at him then, eyes bright with a fragile flame. "But what if they never see past my skin? What if all I am meant to be is a shadow, forever running?" His hand found hers, rough but steady, fingers intertwining in a silent vow. "Then we run until they must see, until even the hardest hearts crack, until love forces the world to remember what it has forgotten." The wilderness around them was unrelenting, winds that whispered old songs of war and survival, the crunch of boots long faded, the watchful eyes of creatures that neither judged nor cared. It was a place outside time, where their story could unfold unmasked. Yet the peace was fragile. One night, beneath the hollow hush of settling dusk, things opened up, and something brought them back, unmasked. "This feels real." Distant sounds stirred, a murmur of voices carried on the wind, fragments of laughter too cruel for the quiet night. Kima's eyes sharpened. "See us as people. They see us as problems to erase." The young woman's breath caught, fear and defiance mingling in a turbulent tide. The lessons of exile and capture were etched deep into her bones. But alongside the dread gleamed a stubborn hope, forged from the moments spent by Kima's side, a hope that defied the bitterness. "We must prepare," Kima said, rising with a fierce resolve that filled the camp's shadows with light. "Tonight, we become more than fugitives. We become the heart of a new story, one written with courage, with a love they cannot break." She stood too, the weight of her scars lifted by the rising strength within. Together, they gathered their few belongings, steeling themselves for the storm that drew near. The night air thickened with the scent of smoke and sweat, the forest alive with the distant drumbeat of soldiers closing in. Cries, commands, the clatter of weapons, warnings to those daring enough to stand against the tide. Kima's hand tightened on hers as the first fires blossomed on the horizon, a blazing signal of war and survival. He met her eyes, the fierce light of a warrior and the tender glow of a lover intertwined. "This is no longer just our fight," he said. Voice of vow carried on the wind. "The battle to claim our place, our love, begins now." And in the shadow of the encroaching expedition, beneath the ancient trees bearing silent witness to so much blood and hope, the first clash of destiny erupted, setting the stage for a battle that would decide not only their survival, but the future of all who dared love beyond the scars. The enemy's lines advanced relentlessly, their intent as cold and unforgiving as the frontier itself. The quiet world they had dreamed of was about to ignite. And in that charged silence before the storm, Kima's heart beat steady, a beacon in the dark. The battle to come would decide everything. The crack of distant rifles cut through the thick air as Kima rallied his people beneath the gathering twilight. His voice, fierce and unwavering, carried across the ridge, a clarion call that stirred the hearts of both warriors and those who sought redemption in a world long cruel. Around him, the young Apache woman stood tall, not as the outcast who once bore the weight of scorn and deformity, but as a beacon of courage and strength that no shadow could dim. The enemy expedition crested the hill with thunderous advance, faces grim and eyes cold with purpose to snuff out the embers of resistance. Yet Kima's band moved as one, a living testament to defiance born not only of survival, but of love that had defied the cruelest odds. Amidst the clash of steel and the whip of arrows, the young woman proved more than her scars. Her mind, sharp and clear, guided the tribe's movements, anticipating the enemy's strikes, weaving strategy from chaos. She was not the fragile soul once whispered about in hidden corners. She was the pulse of hope, the spirit that urged others to stand when despair beckoned. Kima fought with the fury of the land itself, his every swing a poem of protection, for her, for their future. When foes surged close, his presence was a fortress, shielding the woman who had stolen his heart, despite a world that sought to deny her worth. The battle wove and shifted through meadows and wooded hollows, the air thick with the taste of sweat and smoke. Their enemies faltered not for the fire before them, but for the unyielding bond that forged the warriors together. The young woman's courage was a beacon that pierced the darkness, her wisdom a lantern that lit paths through the engulfing night. As the dusk gave way to the stars, the assault began to waver. The oppressive tide of colonial forces stumbled in the face of a unity they had not anticipated. Kima's steady leadership and the young woman's insights proved a shield against the storm. Slowly, the hunter's resolve cracked like thin ice beneath heavy feet. In the aftermath, bruised but unbroken, the survivors gathered beneath the vast heavens. The air hummed with exhaustion, mingled with a fierce exhilaration, an unspoken acknowledgement that this battle was not the end, but a beginning. Word traveled swiftly to the tribal council. The elders who had once cast judgment, now silent in the presence of undeniable truth. The union of these two souls had shattered long-held paradigms, pressing open the narrow gates of tradition to allow in the light of acceptance. The council convened in solemn assembly, faces carved with the lines of countless winters and wisdom earned through hardship. Their voices, once harsh with exclusion, softened under the weight of change. The head elder, who had declared the young woman a threat, now stood before the gathered tribe and spoke with a humility born of witnessing courage beyond physical form. "We have been blind," he intoned, voice steady, yet tinged with reverence. "The strength we sought was never in perfection of flesh, but in the heart's fierce fire. Let this union be the bond that mends our broken views, a testament that honor finds home in acceptance. The assembly murmured, whispers turning to affirmations, the air shifting from cold judgment to warm understanding. The young woman and Kima stood together, their hands clasped, a symbol not of conquest, but of harmony forged through trial and love. Their exile was undone, replaced by a welcome that embraced difference as a teaching, deformity as a mark of survival and resilience. The tribe had learned that scars on the skin could not compare to the scars healed by love and courage. In the quiet moments that followed, beneath the vast canopy of stars, Kima turned to her, eyes reflecting the firelight and something deeper, a promise fulfilled. No longer will the world choose worth by what it sees with blind eyes, he said softly. We have rewritten what it means to be strong. She smiled, a grace born of pain transformed. And in our shadows, love found the light that will guide us all. As dawn painted the sky's soft gold, the renewed tribe stood, not as remnants of old fears, but as architects of a new legacy. One where acceptance blossomed and love was the most potent shield. Their story, the tale of a young deformity once sold like property, and the warrior who loved her beyond measure, had become legend. A legacy whispered through the winds and etched into the earth itself. That true worth transcends outward scars, and love, fierce and unyielding, can heal the deepest divides. Together, they walked forward into a future unbound by the shadows of the past, where scars told stories not of shame, but of survival, hope, and the unbreakable power of the human heart.